Hi, and welcome back to Talk Therapy channel on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about compassion fatigue. When I worked years ago as a sign language interpreter, our field was beginning to identify a challenge that at the time we called vicarious trauma, but now it's more commonly known as compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress. Sign language interpreters are one example of professional people who are susceptible to compassion fatigue. We worked as conduits between people who use sign language to communicate and those who don't, in virtually every life situation that you could imagine. Now, interpreters are generally very highly trained professional people, but anytime you find yourself working in the midst of someone's most intimate moments of their lives, you become susceptible to compassion fatigue. Add to that interpreters adhere to a code of confidentiality, which limits or eliminates their ability to express themselves and get support about a job. This is necessary to protect the client's privacy. However, it does raise the risk of compassion fatigue. Now, when I went back to school years later for a second master's degree in counseling psychology, I was amazed at the emphasis that was put on self-care, and it was specifically to avoid compassion fatigue. In my field as a therapist, we're encouraged to seek out professional supervision or peer consultation in order to process our feelings about our work. We don't share names or details about clients, but we do have the ability to speak to someone in a confidential manner in order to process our feelings and our frustrations. I believe it makes us better therapists, and it allows us to continue to be effective in our work while maintaining a good, healthy emotional state and avoiding burnout. Other professions affected by compassion fatigue might include doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, and related occupations. One that surprised me was the number of hairdressers who have told me that they feel compassion fatigue and burnout. Clients will sit in their chairs and open up and tell them virtually everything about their lives. Many of us in the field of healthcare work with people who are suffering, whether it's physical illness, emotional distress, or trauma. We often also work to affect positive change in society, and that can sometimes feel very difficult to achieve or sometimes impossible. It can be hard not to give in to negativity. Even working one-on-one with individuals can be heart-wrenching sometimes. Most of us choose these lines of work because we genuinely care about other people. So how do we maintain an effective way of working with others while taking care of ourselves in a healthy way in order to avoid compassion fatigue? More importantly, how do we deal with it once we already feel we have the symptoms? Let's look a little closer at compassion fatigue, the signs, and how you may know if you have it. Some of the symptoms might include feeling depressed or sad, very negative, overly critical of your environment, feeling like you need to do a lot of complaining, lack of motivation or boredom at work. You may isolate from others, feeling that being with other people at the end of the day is more draining than it is fulfilling. Abuse of drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, or other addictive behaviors. A couple of signs and symptoms that I notice most often in my own clients are: one, an increase in physical symptoms like gastrointestinal upset or chronic headaches or high blood pressure. And another very common complaint is absolute physical and mental exhaustion. Now, compassion fatigue doesn't only happen to individuals. You may actually see it on an organizational level. Let's say, for example, you work in an agency that provides nursing services. You may notice symptoms that seem to be prevalent throughout the entire staff. Some of the things you might notice are a lack of cohesiveness or a sense of being a team, sort of a sense of hopelessness about the future vision of the company, an increase in absenteeism or chronic lateness. There may be an increase in a negative attitude toward management, or you can notice tasks and projects don't get completed, or they don't get completed on time. The staff may show sort of a desire to break company rules. They may butt heads and show an inability to get along with one another. There may be constant ups and downs in coworker relationships as a sign of compassion fatigue. One of the problems is that caregiving or service jobs particularly in social services, may involve long hours and low pay and sometimes uncomfortable positions. So if you're working very hard and you're not getting paid very well for it, and maybe you feel underappreciated, the risk goes up for developing burnout. A common and understandable coping mechanism that people generally try when they begin to feel burned out is just to stuff their feelings. It's a way that they are able to keep going. But the problem with that is when that happens, the feelings generally do emerge at some time, and they can actually build up to the point of creating a psychological or physical crisis. If you have been juggling or struggling with complex emotions around your job, with information and support and self-care, you can start on the road to recovery from compassion fatigue. Many times people don't take the time to realize how much their jobs affect them emotionally. So let's talk about some specifics of self-care and how you can start to heal from compassion fatigue. The first thing to do is to notice that your batteries need recharging. It's important to first learn to recognize that you're wearing down, and then stop and take the time to begin to add in things that you like to do, ways of taking care of yourself every single day. That's the first step in healing from compassion fatigue. Now, self-care is not as easy as it sounds. If it were, you wouldn't be watching this videotape. Old habits can be comfortable and hard to break, even if they're bad for you. Lasting lifestyle change takes a commitment on your part to make those changes, to adjust your daily schedule and restructure, and it takes time. Experts say it can take as long as 6 months for lasting change to really take effect. So a little more about the do's and don'ts of recovery from compassion fatigue. Again, first, increasing your awareness is number one, becoming aware when you're feeling burned out or worn down. Instead of going on autopilot or stuffing your feelings down, becoming aware of how you're feeling is the first step toward being able to express it and heal it. Next, talk to people who can support and validate you. I understand that most of us do have to maintain professional confidentiality, and that's fine. You can speak to a peer, a supervisor, or a therapist in confidentiality. You might need to take inventory of your own personal boundaries. Decide when you need to say no. I tell my clients, no is a complete sentence. Most of us have to learn how to say it effectively without feeling eaten up with guilt. But that can be one of the key steps in feeling better when you're getting burned out. It's okay to clarify your personal boundaries and to decide what works and doesn't work for you. Next, and I think I probably say this in every single video, eating properly, getting enough sleep, staying hydrated, exercising in whatever way you can physically, spending time with loved ones, friends, family, getting outside, finding a balance so that not all of your energy is going to your job. So ask yourself, what are your interests outside of work? What are you doing to maintain that balance? If there's a lack of balance, it's time to start to look for activities and things that interest you so that you can begin to find yourself again and sort of rebuild your identity outside of work. Sometimes you can feel as if during the day you're going from one crisis to the next crisis to the next crisis. As much as you can, try to structure your life so that you're more proactive than reactive. Schedule your time, keep track of things. You know that there's always going to be unexpected occurrences, things get a little bit chaotic, but as much as you can, take control of your schedule. And you'll probably find that you have more energy to deal with the crises when they do come up. Next, reserve your energy for what's important. In other words, choose your battles. Allow yourself to withdraw from situations that really aren't worth your time, such as squabbles between coworkers, things like that. Pull back, save your energy for what matters to you. And while it's very important to develop a good support system around you, and by that I mean people that listen well, who care about you, who support you and encourage you. The other side of that is that not always do people understand exactly what you're experiencing, unless maybe they're in the same field. If you're in the medical field, for example, and you work in the ICU, it's very difficult to explain what your day is like to a significant other who might work in business. It's just a very different experience. Can't always be understood by others. That's why it's even more important to find other people who do understand what you're going through, again, whether it's a supervisor or a colleague you trust, to allow you to express yourself in a way that you feel understood and validated. So while it is important to spend time with other people, whether you're venting at the end of a hard day or just socializing and having fun, it's also important to spend time alone when you need it. I don't mean isolating yourself from others, but I mean just quiet time, doing something that you enjoy doing that's calming, where you really feel like you can recharge your batteries and find your center again. You've got to commit to recharging your batteries every day. You can start with small steps, something like committing to stopping all other activities when you eat your lunch every day. I see people eating in their cars. I am totally guilty of eating at my desk or trying to balance doing computer work or talking on the phone, eating on the run. If you can stop just one little unhealthy habit like that, give yourself a quiet moment during the day, that's a great first step in starting to heal yourself from being burned out. There are a number of things that don't help. Don't fall into a rut of complaining and complaining and complaining. If it's not working, think about how to fix it. It's okay to have a bad day every once in a while, but if complaining has become your lifestyle, stop, take a step back, look at what's going on, and ask yourself, how can I make this better? Throwing yourself into work, longer hours, working harder, generally doesn't help either. Recovery from compassion fatigue takes a certain amount of kindness toward yourself. Pushing yourself harder generally doesn't help. Another thing that doesn't help is self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. I recall a nurse years ago who worked in the ER, and the only way that she could get through her shift, which was very difficult and very long hours, was to abuse Adderall. She was taking it all the time, and it was the only way she could get through her work shift. That's not ultimately healthy for you. It's a quick fix that really in the long run doesn't work at all. If you're so exhausted and burned out that you need meds to get through your work shift, it's time to stop and look at healthy recovery. Stop neglecting yourself and start to look at your own needs and interests. Healing the symptoms of compassion fatigue is an inside job. It takes time, commitment, and a desire to change. You want to be consistent with your plan for self-care. You want to develop an awareness of how you're feeling and when you start to see some warning signs of feeling worn down. You'll also be clarifying your personal boundaries and professional boundaries and begin to look at the origins of any negative feelings that you're having about your work. As you continue to consistently do the internal work and self-care, your life will begin to get better. And you never know, you may rediscover a love for the job that was burning you out. On my website, I've uploaded 2 documents that you might find helpful. All you have to do is go to the website, click the links, and download them. You don't even have to enter your name and sign up for a mailing list or anything like that. They're completely free, no obligation. Go to www.fletchertherapy.com/forms.htm, and I'll put that link in the down bar. One of them is called the Quality of Life Assessment, and it includes a scoring chart. It'll help you determine whether or not you're experiencing compassion fatigue. The other is a life stress test that can help you kind of gauge where you are in your life and how much stress you're experiencing. So feel free to go to the website and help yourself. Thanks so much for watching the video. I welcome your comments, your subscriptions, and your suggestions for future videos. Take care. Bye-bye.